Welcome to Wind, Reel, and Print. My name's Ryan.
And my name is Kevin.
And today we're doing a Bay Area movie. Bay Area meaning the San Francisco Bay Area movie. And this time it is Harold and Maude, which I was kind of surprised it was a Bay Area movie. I didn't realize that. And
Same.
Yeah, just a happy accident.
It's very subtly a Bay Area movie, but it does it in a way that I liked. Yeah. Just using Bay Area as an aesthetic.
Yeah.
To complement the themes of the film.
And it is very Bay Area, not just San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about it's mostly all over the place. I don't even know if it might have been in San Francisco just for a moment.
There's some San Francisco stuff. Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Half
San
Moon
Mateo.
Bay, San Bruno, Redwood City.
Yeah. And then the bridge from San Mateo, that bridge down there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty sure it was that one.
Yeah, there's
well,
no.
Not what was the bridge? Do you remember the bridge?
The bridge?
Yeah, the bridge where the cop is chasing them. Well, folks, it isn't that exciting to be, but there is a bridge in the movie, and it does at some point. But there's also even just seeing where they were by the overpass that I sometimes drive by. That
Emeryville Mud Flats.
Oh yeah.
They had that too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, which is over here.
Yeah, and then that might even be what I'm thinking of. But yeah, there was some stuff by the freeway where I always exit near Gilman Street, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're sitting out there in kind of the muddy waters, and there were all these beautiful little art pieces out there, and I was like, oh man, I wish we still had stuff like that.
It's the Fremont one, the Dumbarton.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Dumbarton.
Yeah.
So yes, we have a Bay Area movie in Harold and Maude, and it came out in, when was it? 1971.
1971.
About you guessed it, Harold and Maude. Harold being a rich. Actually, I'm going to read this. The plot follows the exploits of Harold Chasen, a young man who is intrigued with death and who rejects the life of his detached mother, the life his detached mother prescribes for him. Mm-hmm. Harold develops a friendship and eventually a romantic relationship with 79-year-old Maude, who teaches Harold about the importance of living life to its fullest.
Yeah. So what did you like about this film from a formal aspect?
I appreciated the unique, something I kind of brought up just before we started recording is how it really feels like Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Before Wes Anderson. And I think that was the first thing that kind of caught me off guard, was it was funny. I mean, it opens with a very dark moment and immediately uses it for humor. It doesn't wait on it too long.
Right.
And which was really cool and it just different. And I was like, it immediately let me know what the tone of the film is going to be.
When he fakes his death.
Yeah, when he fakes his death.
I really and I think that is something that you even see in Wes Anderson, right? Is his discussion of grief. Yeah. And looking at death in a comedic way, especially Asteroid City, right? Looking at existence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Definitely relates from a formal aspect, but also from themes and stuff too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I liked the look of it. It felt very of the era, which was great.
Felt like I was watching an old movie.
It did feel like, even it almost looked like it had some blur to it too. It just felt old.
Yeah.
Had some really cool locations as well. Obviously, it's the Bay Area stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, overall, I was just having kind of a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very quaint and cute, and I just was giggling the whole time.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
And it's I really enjoy, I think it's called 3,000 Years of Longing, the George Miller movie.
Yeah.
Another unconventional romantic film.
Okay.
Which I appreciate. I appreciate something a little different, and where you can kind of get a very unique perspective. Obviously, Maude being a really great character that pushes a character like Harold into those kind of situations that he wouldn't really get into or be involved in. and makes him better for it. And by the end is a completely changed individual. Is playing the banjo.
Yeah.
He went from hanging himself to banjo playing, which I think is about as progression as you can get in the film.
Right. Like the juxtaposition of life and death.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Going from that kind of youthful nihilism that you would end up seeing and finding some sort of like sincerity out of that. Yeah. I thought that was most surprising. Like her kind of these little monologues that she has about like understanding life, especially when you get that she's about to die, right? Or she kind of commits suicide herself. Like, I think that juxtaposition of like someone approaching death versus someone about to start their life, like kind of comes out in these two characters in an interesting way.
Yeah. And he is definitely someone that I don't think he really entertains death in like an actual sense. Like, I don't think when he's pretending to commit suicide, because that's what he does in most of the film, is he's like trying to kill himself
or harm himself,
or harm himself, but mostly as a means of getting at his mom, I think, more often than not. But maybe the film is trying to say it a little differently, because I know he does ask, the therapist does ask him how many times he's done it, and if he does it only because of his mom, and he says no.
But then he says, like, after I did it that first time, like, I just wanted to keep doing it, or something along those lines. Like, when he described the first time he did it.
So it was something a little different, and it makes it like a more of a malleable character trait, because it's kind of hard to like really explain away someone like being suicidal, and they just meet like someone with good vibes, and all of a sudden they're not anymore.
I actually have something that I feel like describes that maybe.
Yeah.
I write in my thing, at the core of Harold and Maude is the idea of performativity and role-playing. Society asks us to inhabit roles to fit within predestined segments of family, school, work, blah, blah, blah. Harold's obsession with faking his death is a pointed attempt to deny his participation in society's role-playing. And all Harold needed was someone who can join in on the charade.
Yeah.
So, like, Maude kind of being the person who shows him that like you don't have to do it and you don't have to play by these rules. Like, I'm gonna steal this car, I'm gonna live wherever the fuck I want, I'm gonna just steal people's shit. Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. That to her, right? Like, she can just do whatever. And like I liked the point where we get at the end with the third girl that the mom kind of like offers up, I guess, to Harold in a weird way. And she doesn't care. Yeah. She's a Shakespeare actor, which I think ties into a previous episode. Yeah. Who like can fake her death and like plays into the thing, and he can't shake her. Yeah. And that's kind of what he needed in the end, was like someone who could play along with the act. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. That is a really cool little observation, and you could see how. And they actually were thinking about possibly even making a sequel to this. And you can kind of see how it could have maybe worked
with those two characters.
Yeah, or at least with Harold, and then there was also a prequel planned.
I see.
Well. Then they just never got.
I don't know. Yeah.
Got enough sauce.
It feels.
It is great as its own thing. Yeah. You don't need to prequel, sequel everything.
I don't know if I want the world. I just I don't like this as a piece. Yeah.
And I don't. It also wasn't even the initial release underperformed at the box office, and but it gradually found success in repertory theaters and recouped its costs after several years. So it took some time for it to get. And then became a cult classic, too, which a lot of films that's what happens. Is it takes a little bit of time for us to understand, like, okay, this is going to be a little unconventional and maybe feels different, but it might also play more toward, for one, it was written by a younger person. Like, I mean, the fact that it was written by a UCLA student as their thesis project is a perfect example of, like, okay, this is telling something that is meant to subvert a lot of different things. And it's great that Hal Ashby was the one to come in and be the director.
Yeah, I think to speak to like maybe its reception, like he's kind of at a point of New Hollywood era where like filmmakers are going against normal Hollywood expectations, and I think maybe that the audience hadn't yet caught up to like what this was yet.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Wes Anderson. I think that's such a great thing. I want to kind of maybe talk about American eccentric cinema and how I feel like this is maybe the founding film for that. According to Wikipedia.
Yes. Sponsored by now.
Yeah. So it's kind of like more of a mode, like a way of approaching filmmaking. But American eccentric cinema is marked by films that are deeply concerned with ethics and morality, the obligations of the individual, and the effects of a family breakdown and social alienation. Filmmakers include Wes Anderson, Charlie Kaufman, Spike Jonze, Linklater, Baumbach, other filmmakers as well.
Yeah.
But you get that kind of feeling that of this film, Harold and Maude, of like these weird, quirky characters kind of pushed up against society's expectations. And even with Juno and Little Miss Sunshine that we talked about too, like these kind of like societal satires using weird characters as like the antithesis of what this means. And
stuff. It usually gives like the straight character, you might say, an excuse to like dip into that world.
What do you mean?
Like Juno is a perfect example. Like Juno, I think that was the character's name.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So Juno, and then I don't remember Michael Cera's character's name, but I believe Michael Cera's character is like played straight.
Yeah.
Is not like trying, but Juno is a more interesting character, is different, kind of plays it a little differently, and is able to make like a character like that kind of be like, oh, I'll be around this person, and then it inspires them to do more things. I know there are there are probably even better examples because it's been so long since I've seen Juno.
Sure.
But that's kind of the, like, there's just this one that kind of just changes the way this other person thinks. Oh, and I'm thinking of even Jojo Rabbit is a good example too, of like that little kid. Yeah. And the girl kind of like inspires him.
Yeah, maybe that's like a tradition, like character.
I would imagine so, because a film needs something like that.
Yeah.
You usually need like an audience member kind of character, and or at least just typically you have like a character that is kind of like taking in the world for the first time, and someone who's bringing them into the next world. And that's, in a bizarre, quirky character is a perfect way to just bring someone in, especially if there's some sort of love interest kind of bound, because you need them kind of glued together for some reason.
Yeah, that's true.
And that honestly probably goes back all the way to like
mythology.
It Happened One Night, right? Even like way back then.
Yeah, early. I mean, even Screwball, right? That's like the kind of the character design of Screwball.
Exactly. I think that's just a very typical, kind of character.
True. Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so going back to American eccentric cinema, it's termed as a metamodern kind of branding. So I keep mentioning metamodern. Metamodernism is like a kind of branch off of modernism, like the idea of modernism. So like kind of briefly, modernism is like appreciation of tradition and romanticization of like storytelling. So like Top Gun is like you would consider like a modern film. Postmodern is like irony, like full on irony and maybe nihilism, and like full breakdown of society, and like kind of poking and prodding to the point of it not existing anymore.
Yeah.
And kind of having that like nihilism, like a lack of a sentimentality, I guess.
Yeah.
Metamodernism is the oscillation between these two poles. So they call it new sincerity because you're using irony and satire to find appreciation for life. And so you're going back and forth between these two kind of aesthetics and modes of thinking and finding a new way of like falling into that. And that follows kind of like the idea of absurdism, where you're making fun of life and maybe not enjoying it, but then finding a way to like appreciate the value of it, I guess.
So I'm trying to come up with a metamodern movie.
Yeah.
Are we talking like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or?
Yeah, that falls into American eccentric cinema.
Yeah.
But you can say, that's a metamodern form. Yeah. Like, or even Everything Everywhere All at Once is literally using that as like the character juxtapositions of like not caring and caring, right? And like how does that like work, and even just like the meta-ness of that film, right? It's
totally.
It's like so much into the fabric of it.
Yeah.
So like I forgot, well, like, Harold and Maude is maybe a great influence on a lot of these sorts of things, but I feel like the metamodern kind of thinking is essential to cinema because of its form and because of where it comes in during society and stuff. And that like what I think of The Great Gatsby as like the first metamodern thing that is like using romanticism and satire conjunctually in a way that like you can't really get what it's trying to, like, it can say so much, you know what I mean?
Great Gatsby is a perfect example, I think, because it has everything, and it just feels right.
Yes.
Like, that's also like a really weird thing, like kind of a cop out to say, but damn, it just feels right. It can say things and also be funny.
Yes.
And it can be sweet and dark and all of the things in between, but it does have this like, there is a humanity that is always, it certainly isn't a nihilistic book.
Right.
It does have all of these things, but there is like, in the end, it is a book about like goodness, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And like looking at like society and morality and stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I just like these sorts of, or this is kind of like the baseline of the meta-realism too, in a way, is like this kind of mode of thinking and like expressing these themes and values and stuff like that.
I got to do some more research on this because I definitely want to learn more, and that is a lot. But that's really, and it feels like it's just one of those things, and it's the nature of this podcast, and it's the nature of me being someone that is still learning and still kind of growing in all of these spaces.
Sure.
But it all is just the fabric of cinema.
Yes.
And the language of it, and it's all about like, putting a name to it and pulling out and being like, oh, it's this thing, and then how it relates to everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really cool. I got to check out some more metamodern things.
Yeah.
And so obviously this isn't considered metamodern, is it?
My argument is that it is a metamodern film.
Okay.
Because it's like, I like the juxtaposition of like this kid who is trying to kill himself, like literally a manifestation of death. And then you have this woman who's like fully embracing the appreciation of life to the point of like self-degradation in a way.
Yeah.
Like blindly. And like how each of them can help each other move into the next phase of their life or death or whatever. I think that is the metamodern thing, right?
Yeah.
Is like these two poles playing off of each other and then finding resolution within it. Like that is undefinable. That is like, you can't put a word onto it and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Because I was like expecting it to be a nihilist thing because of the era that it was made. And like, I just have an expectation with that sort of filmmaking. But then it becomes the most sweetest thing at the end. And the message that I pull by the end, I'm just like, wow, that is like so heartfelt, like almost on the verge of tears. You know what I mean?
It was so good and so sweet, and really surprised me. But it's also, it really is the same way I feel about Wes Anderson movies a lot of times, especially the early ones. It's just like how it can go there. Like Royal Tenenbaums is a perfect example of like, eventually you get to a scene where Luke Wilson's character is cutting his wrists.
Right.
And like to get all the way to that point, and then the movie can recover from that and be fun again.
Yeah.
Like, but take itself, like it really is serious.
Yeah.
And even by the end, we get to a very serious moment where Harold is like really distraught about what Maude has done.
Right.
Like the tone completely changes. And
Right.
it's the first time you see Harold really care.
Right. And to have that, just like to even think of that, like, it's just great.
It's great. I loved it. It
great.
just, it feels good. If there's anything you can get from this, it's just that it feels just right. And it dances, and I don't even think we talked about the music, but the music is so good too, and that's also very Wes Anderson to me.
And even like within the framings, like when he's talking to the priest and the general and I forget who else, but it's like face
therapist,
like a straight on, like the production design is so like perfect. And
it is exactly. It was wild once I saw it. I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is totally, and I haven't found anything where Wes Anderson has been like, oh yeah, Hal Ashby, because I guess Hal Ashby's films are a lot like this. And so I need to actually see more of them. But like,
you could probably find something.
Yeah, exactly. People online were like, oh, what are some movies that directors would like? And so it was like a Reddit thread, and some of them were absolutely insane. But someone was like, oh, Wes Anderson would like these. So I haven't seen anything, but it's like, okay, there is this idea that Hal Ashby, especially this film, does have some connection. But I would be really curious of what Wes Anderson and a lot of these other directors.
Yeah. I mean, Wes Anderson, he's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Because he has a lot of influences, and I think what makes him so unique is that he's pulling from a lot of different
and he people. Has a very unique style. Like he can pull from all of this and do something that it's the most obvious style, I think, for anyone who goes to film school. That's the easiest one to point to. Like,
this is what film style
exactly
look like. For sure. I had another point. Oh yeah, just comparing Y Tu Mamá También to Harold and Maude. Let's see. Yeah, I'd say like
and I personally have not seen this film, but
so Y Tu Mamá También is a film by Alfonso Cuarón. He's a Mexican filmmaker, and it was like one of his early kind of films. And I guess it's like in the tradition of this Harold and Maude kind of quirkiness, but also like in the story, both have young men who enter relationships with an older woman. The older woman is dealing with her death, like the imminence of her death. Mm-hmm. There's like a boyish immaturity that juxtaposes the woman's wisdom, and then these clashing identities are like matched by hedonistic appreciation for life and also its misgivings. And the films kind of represent completion of a cycle, starting and restarting, like endings and beginnings, and end up being like didactic playgrounds for life lessons and bittersweet farewells. Yeah, that is exactly what Harold and Maude is. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think Cuarón maybe had mentioned there was a similarity unknowingly. Yeah. And I think that happens a lot, right? Like with Josh, like the things that we like and influence us can somehow subconsciously come through in the stuff that we end up making. I imagine for a lot of people, this film had and especially when you get a movie that becomes a cult classic. Yeah. It is going to seep in everything because it is just such a unique vision and style that you can easily play against any of the other films that came out of around that time. It probably was very unique compared to everything else. So it'll always stand out and be kind of like have some depth to it. Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder I guess, how do you think this film relates to the Bay Area in like a thematic and maybe formal way? Oh, I mean, I think aside from the setting, you know. Yeah. I mean, I think it is what the Bay Area has in its history is obviously the Summer of Love. Okay. And those things. And hippie culture. Like counterculture, yeah. Exactly. And obviously she, kind of represents hippieism in a way, like this kind of like throwing off of the shackles of like what our purpose is, especially of a rigid culture.
And you can see that especially when it comes to, in this film, when it comes to the Vietnam War is happening in the middle of this film, and they make fun of it, and they make fun of the military in this, which kind of really surprised me, because you don't really see that in movies even now. Like I feel like there isn't enough, there's still a lot of like reverence to the military, especially when it comes to like Marvel movies. Like you'll never, like that's such an integral part of all of these things.
That's because
Come on, Kevin, say it.
Because there's movies that the military are funding.
Exactly.
And you can't talk bad about the military.
Yes.
But I think that's a unique aspect of the Vietnam War and just like that era of America, is that
there was so much
postmodern thought was like critiquing these, not just the military, but these big structures of society and like the politics of education. Like we were critiquing things, and that's how we were like breaking things apart and stuff. And that's what they do in this film too, more than just the military, the church, I forget someone else, but like all these pillars of the community, and they kind of cast them in like a weird, like they're dumb kind of a thing. I feel like that was the kind of defining aspect of that era. You know.
And I will say, to help you with that thought that you keep dropping, the third thing, it's the military, it's the priest, and then it's the therapist.
The therapist.
Which also is like this overanalyzation of like what the kid's just grown up and feeling things and like can't conform to society, but they have to explain away and do what they can to form him back into society.
Right.
And that's what all of those characters are doing, is they're trying to drag him on. And so for me, the Bay Area has this history of these people that were part of the counterculture movement, and in some ways, the Bay Area is a poisoned well now, and I think it's because of a lot of those people. When you really look at things now, like there is a closing off, like this assumption that back then was just what they were doing, and now is not just.
What do you mean?
Like, especially when it comes to protesting and things like that. Like there's a big part of like Berkeley history, but you get a lot of old people in the Bay Area that are not for these things. At least that's been my kind of understanding in a lot of like the places I end up living. And I'm not really living in the cities. I live in some of the suburbs is almost like, I don't think they're truly suburbs either, but more of the housing areas of like single family homes.
Right.
And there is just like, it feels in some ways like we've forgotten what it is. And you said something either off mic or in another episode about how like people forget at a certain point as they get older, because eventually the revolution doesn't make money. And that is where I feel like the Bay Area is now. It is about money. We're throwing everything to the side in pursuit of that. And it has I personally, it doesn't, at least maybe the soul is there of revolution, of revolutionary thought, and of throwing off the shackles of society.
Sure.
But it is so minuscule compared to whatever it was back then.
Right.
And so this movie just kind of plays up what I think the Bay Area had at that point, at least to my understanding.
And even to tie in Harold into this, kind of the younger generation brought up by higher, like upper class society, who like don't accept their parents' like mistakes and blah 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 blah, and like learning from past generation to move into the corporate space and stuff like that. Anyways,
did you have any thought on the Bay Area aspect of it that you wanted to elaborate before?
No, I think that was a great point, and I definitely agree and would just be repeating what you would say.
Oh, there you go, folks.
Yeah,
we agree.
That's a good. No, I think that was a great point.
Yeah.
Like,
it's interesting, and I think this will be a good exercise when we do more of these Bay Area ones, because I think it'll be good to understand even more about the Bay Area, because I mean that's a very superficial even perspective of the Bay Area.
I mean, yeah.
But it is still very, very much a part of it, and this is like at that exact era that we're talking about, or at least of that kind of historical Bay Area of the hippie movement and the Summer of Love. So right on. Well,
yeah, that's a wrap, folks.
Bye.
Wind Reel in Print is a podcast by Salad Brain Productions. You can find us on Instagram at Wind Reel in Print Pod. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts. And please, if you like the show, leave a rating and review. We'll see you next time.